Stagflation is coming, and it is not because of clogged supply lines but because stuff isn't going to get produced, period. Even before the pandemic, the economy was doomed to fail. Job growth that was limited to low-paying part-time service industry jobs, taxes cut for the rich, CEOs, giving themselves record bonuses, more money spent on tax buybacks than hiring workers, no investment in smaller communities, etc. This is what you get when you put the central banking cabal in a blender with the CIA. You get a global diabolical dystopia, in which there's absolutely zero need for functioning markets. In fact, this is just the start. This push for global diabolical dystopia is exactly what is happening. America, land of the brave, home of the free, must be shown as a police state, then the others will fall in line when this is finished. If those who are orchestrating this dystopia are successful, we will have the same freedom a chicken in his cage or a pig in his pen has. They use this pandemic to cover up a 50-year Ponzi scheme that was about to collapse in the peak of the baby boomer retirement, that happens to be right now. Make sure the baby boomers can't get the wealth out of their houses because it was the Ponzi scheme money that they stole from their children anyway. Then hyperinflate the currency to get the rest of the fake money back from anyone that had savings or investments. Only the cash-rich will qualify to buy homes, scoop the defaulted assets up and rent them out to collect the UBI that is going around. Taxes, food, rent, and gas will skyrocket. Nobody is safe. This is economic Darwinism. Anyone that was paying attention could see this coming a mile away. It's designers to fail. It's not about recovery. It's about transferring wealth and profiting off of default swaps and hedge funds. The great economy that never was. We are already in the Great Depression 2.0. All the numbers have been fudged, and if Americans knew the real numbers, they'd faint out of fear. All the health crisis did was to bring it in the spring instead of the fall. Look at the millions who were behind on their credit card, mortgage, and car loan payments. A V-shaped economy will not be possible until the country shifts from a house of cards service-based economy to a manufacturing one. That will require people willing to pay more for products made in the USA and for companies to be willing to gamble that they will. That will take years. Or a major war. A month or so, I was ridiculed for saying there would be food shortages this summer. I hope that people who live in houses are turning their backyards and front yards into mini-farms. And I hope, instead of buying Xbox games, gadgets and sending strangers online money for posing in their undies, use that money to stock and restock your pantry and get some home gym equipment. The main thing is not to be duped into believing things will return to normal in 2021 or 2022. There is nothing, absolutely nothing supporting a return to the old normal. Deficit spending has never been sustainable. There can be no recovery until the debt is either paid off or forgiven. I'm not very hopeful about the second part happening for most folks. Debt is slavery, and that is exactly where the elites want the rest of us to be. People forget there are two economies. One for the rich 1% and the other for everyone else. The rich will get a V-shaped recovery paid for by taxpayers. The probable scenario is that we hump along in lockdown for a couple of months, open up for a few weeks until rates start to show a modest increase in a few densely packed urban areas, then get locked down again, for years. Of course, the ongoing global depression will be steadily worsening in the background, and we'll probably be dealing with widespread civil unrest and hunger within a year or so, if not mass deaths and Mad Max anarchy. The economy isn't going to come back. The casino of bankster gambling capitalism is dead. This isn't a bear, it's a tiger. And the Fed's getting eaten. Let the Fed and the zombie corps and the banksters go bankrupt. We need a new system, and anyway, we're getting it, whether you like it or not. I guarantee you, most of those people who were laid off will not be coming back to work. People who weather the onslaught will be rewarded with higher compensation, as they should be if they can pick up the slack for 35 extraneous people. But by and large, tectonic shifts are already underway in how we work, consume and socialize. And God forbid Americans actually learn to start living within their means. Round-the-clock footage of food disturbances and other socioeconomic ills manifesting in the streets should suffice in convincing some of these somnolent idiots to wake up and start saving more. New cars and phones are going to be luxuries for many going forward. Then there's debt service on this catastrophe, but that's a whole other story. This is a classic bear market rally. Nothing is normal in these markets, despite the market's impressive performance. Something has to give. Most people don't know this. From November 1929 to April 1930, the stock market ripped 50% after that initial plunge, and it lured so many people into thinking that, we're going to be having stimulus, and we're past the worst part of the shock. But people didn't factor into the fact that the shock produced a fundamental change in behavior, and the economy actually went in for another 2 years of distress. That's not what's priced in right now. I think that once we realize that the economy is not going to embark on some V-shaped. The only V in this recovery will be as in, V is for Venezuela. A Venezuela-shaped recovery. I think we're going to give up a lot of these gains. We're actually trading at a multiple that represents market peaks. This is not the sort of multiple you get coming into a new bull market. What we have now is nothing short of market manipulation. Reducing the cost of overnight funds is one thing. Extending the intervention to treasuries or high-quality securities is something we became accustomed to in the aftermath of the last Great Recession. That's when the Fed became a duration bond manager. In a normal rally, you have flows you can identify, but this is a short covering rally, and on top of that, there are no sellers. There are no sellers. People are just too scared to sell stocks. When you hear over and over again, don't fight the Fed, don't fight the Fed, when people see, oh, well, the Fed has actually went in and said they're going to buy high-yield bonds, well, high-yield bonds reside right next to the equity market of the capital structure. We learned that, for example, households were not prepared for this. I was actually stunned to find out that over 50% of American households did not have enough cash on hand to even withstand 3 months of a lockdown. A lot of people out there are yearning for everything to return back to the pre-pandemic normal, and my typical response is, be careful what you wish for, because we knew already before the pandemic that the economy was cooling off. First quarter GDP, just as an example, contracted at a 5% annual rate, and productivity was down 0.9%. So, we already had an economy that was cooling down. Productivity was in a recession. Capital spending had been in a recession. Commercial construction had been in a recession, and for most of last year, we were in a recession in corporate profits. What kept the glue together, of course, was the fact that the consumer kept chugging along, but the pre-pandemic norm was actually quite abnormal, and, in fact, we have to just look at everything in the context of the entire cycle. I mean, here we had the weakest economic growth cycle of all time, barely more than 2% at an annual rate in terms of real GDP, and of course we had a phenomenal stock market that was built on a lot of financial engineering, in the sense that it was the biggest debt for equity swap of all time. Instead of the debt being issued to finance capital expenditure for productivity purposes, it went to buy back stock. So that's the real world that we had. Yes, unemployment was at a 50-year low. That much is true, and we got as low as 3.5%, but took a look at the quality of the jobs that were created. Most of the jobs that were created this cycle were not in physics or in engineering or in the sciences. It was entertainment. It was leisure. It was in hotels. It was in theme parks. So, it's basically what we just found out. We found out that the non-essential part of the economy had to shut down, but who knew until we shut it down that the non-essential part of the US economy was 80% of GDP. Now we have people who are unemployed but making more money, not working, than when they had a job. The incentive system has been destroyed, not by the pandemic, but by the pathetic government response, every step of the way. This economy was destroyed by the great job outsourcing starting with Reagan. Restaurants, dry cleaners and delivery service and Uber jobs are useless. We need shipbuilding, commercial shipbuilding, and the US needs to export products to the world using US shipping, not foreign flag renegade operators. The Fed and government are just putting off the inevitable. Take your pick. 1. The clock runs out on stimulus, and the bottom falls out. 2. More MMT and eventually total collapse as debt continues to explode and crowds out the real economy with stagflation resulting. The reality is that the pandemic is just used as a cover for fundamental problems. There's a famous saying on Wall Street. Do not fight the Fed, and the trend is your friend. With interest rates at zero and perhaps turning negative, all this new printed liquidity will flow into equities to catch yields. But once interest rates ever start to rise again, even modestly, watch out.